Commercial property is one of those topics that people get confused about. They get scared. They get afraid. They stick to residential. They stay in their lane because they don't know what they don't know. This is one of those sessions where we unpacked some of those, how to maximize your returns in commercial property. It was more than that though. We spoke about the due diligence things you need to be considering to make sure you're protecting yourself. You're mitigating that risk. One of the things that got me really excited about this session was we spoke about how to spend $100,000 to increase your valuation by $300,000. We spoke to the step-by-step on how to consider and execute that type of strategy, along with some of the locations that are adding value in 2025 and right now. So this was an absolute cracking session with Michael Schafferius from Palisi Property, and the man Steve Palisi came along as well. We had even questions about insurance, like who pays for the insurance as well, and what that looks like, and the asset types that people need to consider. This is a wide-ranging commercial conversation where you can sort of understand how to maximize those returns. Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Miles, and together with Joe Tucker, we've created Australia's largest property Facebook group. We've over now 83,000 property investors, so buckle up and enjoy this conversation with Michael Schafferius with special guest co-host Steve Palisi from Palisi Property. Let's dive in.
Welcome to AusProp Live, where we bring the big names and we bring the big fun. Today we're going
to... geez, he's nailed it. Well done, Steve. And guys, it's going to be a huge session. We're going to talk about maximizing your return, what to consider when buying and negotiating, a breakdown the insights of each of the assets. So this is something that everybody wants to know, and how to maximize returns and reduce risk. So these are the things, the little known things about commercial property. So we've had a few, Steve's been on for a few sessions, but Michael's even, I'm trying to think, somebody's echoing, but that's okay. It's all good. How you going, Michael? What's happening? It's probably me.
I'm good. How are you? Am I the echo?
No, we're all good. I think it was just you, Jeff, so that's fine. But no, today's fun because we've actually got someone who's actually got real world experience. There's all those gurus like me who write a book and claim to be a self-proclaimed one. Michael's actually walked the walk, which is really cool.
Yeah,
you know what you're doing. You're right.
he's only. You need to do another 2,000 commercial, and then we'll say he's really reached guru status and can retire on a beach in Hawaii or somewhere like that. Yeah. I feel that's where you probably need to go. But no, it is going to be a huge session. The reason I think wanted to get you on, I thought how sexy or how interesting and exciting could due diligence be. But when we were talking last Friday, you have an absolute passion about due diligence and just understanding. And I have a passion about helping other people make money. So I think there's that collaboration and combination. You got Steve there with his beard. It always looks pretty strong. So how are you going anyway, Steve? What's happening?
I'm good. I was late to this because my daughter bit her tongue and was bleeding all over the place. And I'm sure I probably just woke her up then with my intro. So, but besides that, going well, man. Week in the Hunter.
Sounds fun.
Been overseas. Yeah, just getting into work now.
Living life and living large. So
yeah. It's interesting. How's your 7 kids?
7? No, isn't that Jeff? The other Jeff. No, so apparently, our little guy last night. I was on a coaching session, and there was somebody coming outside the house. I'm like, what's going on there? And now our eldest has been put outside the house. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I said, what's going on, buddy? And he just reached wit's ends. But we're not here to talk about our parenting trials and tribulations. We're here to talk about maximizing commercial property returns. And Michael, you are, I got to get the other, I had your little bio up there, but I've gotten rid of it. So that's not great, is it? Anyway, I find it again. So you at least have 10 plus years as a selling agent, and you are the head of due diligence at client relations. I think, hopefully I haven't got that wrong, at Palisi Property. So you've got a lot of experience in this, and you negotiate between $300K to $5 million property deals. So I think you've probably done over sort of 100, maybe 200, maybe even 500 deals in your time as an agent. So I don't know. Yeah. Maybe is it 1,000? How many did you do?
No, it's not 1,000. No.
Okay.
Maybe somewhere between 300 and 500, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of deals. So you've seen warts and all what's going on. So you understand, and we've got Steve over here who's done a lot of property commercial deals as well. So you have an excellent amount of experience on both sides of the fence, being a sales agent. And we're going to talk about some of those negotiating and how agents get the most out of buyers as well. We'll touch on that. So if people have any questions, drop those in the comments and let's crack on. So Steve, where do you want to start?
I think this was a good one because it's like the opposite side. Like most of the people we have on this show, Jeff, are buyers, and it's like, how do we get the best buy? It's nice having Mick on, who's got the experience for both. He's obviously done the selling, so he knows what to do to basically milk us for what he can. And now he works with me in the head of due diligence, which is one of the reasons we actually got him on board, because we got really good data people looking at everything, but we wanted someone who had like knew the tips and the tricks in the industry that we can flip the other way and protect our buyers. But maybe Mick, start at the beginning, like start how you started your career, because he obviously didn't start in real estate.
Has you got the full career? Your full breakdown? Yeah. All right. So my background, I was a Sparky for 5-6 years out of high school. So qualified electrician. And then in the GFC, work got quiet and I got an opportunity to switch out to a sales BDM role for a chemical manufacturer at the Sunshine Coast. So spent 3 years there, absolutely hating the idea that I was a salesman. And then I eventually figured out that sales was pretty much just customer service, just trying to listen to the client and, fill a need, basically. So then I spent another 4 years there loving that role. And then one day, one of my mates actually said to me, he's like, oh, you should do what I'm doing. It's commercial real estate. And it's the same job, but you can earn a lot more money and it's faster pace. And I was oh, okay, that sounds good. And then I started a young family at the time, and so I just jumped in, and 10 years later, here I am. So I was 10 years, or just shy of a decade, as a commercial sales agent on the north side of Brisbane for Rain and Horn Commercial, and that was the only place I worked. So learned from the ground up there, and they were an agency that specialised in more or less sub $5 million assets. So I did leasing on grandma's $20,000 lease in her, retail center that she's owned for 50 plus years, right through to, didn't really go much higher than 7 or 8 mil, but just bigger retail or, bulky goods, multi-tenanted facilities. I would sell some of them and everything in between, which was great. So
did you wake up and, oh, sorry, I was going to say, did you wake up as a kid and say, I want to be a commercial property sales agent? Because what was your dream as a kid?
My dream, I never knew what I wanted to do for work, if I'm being completely honest. I got my job as an electrician because my dad pretended to be me on email and gave a good impression to my boss. And he's like, man, you're really keen for this job, so we're going to hire you. And I was like, great, this is awesome.
Funny story, Mick. My dad could actually be me on email, literally. So, I mean, I shouldn't release too many details because there's so much phishing these days. But yeah, I literally have the same name, so he could pretend and impersonate me.
You Jeffy Jr.
Yes, we don't. I shouldn't tell people. Just see the YouTube viewers spike now. They all came here for the little secrets. So tune in for those because we're going to be releasing more of these.
This is an important topic. We're going to go back to this. So you're Jeffy Jr. Your grandfather Jeff and then your dad was Jeff, and then now you're Jef, and they're just getting smaller and smaller every time?
Grandfather was Neil, or Harry. Yeah, it was Harry or Harold. Lovely bloke down in Victoria. And Warragul.
On a bit of a side note, though, I do know Mick used to want to be a professional skateboarder.
Oh, did you play Tony Hawk? But anyway, there's enough so there's going to be sprinklings of that at our live events coming up because we need to. We're almost filling up because there is room capacity. So make sure I'm going to put. We'll sprinkle that. I couldn't be bothered getting the link now, but I just introduced it. But so Mick, that's exciting that you got there, and I could ask Steve a lot of questions about his childhood as well, but we'll save the couch for later. So Michael, tell us, we've gotten you to there. We've gotten you to where you're now head of due diligence, chief hand holding officer. You were saying before. Sorry, you shouldn't tell me stuff before a show because I may use it against you, and I'll use it against myself.
Probably what my role should be. Yes.
So tell me, for me though. When you were on the sales side, what were some of the things you'd get to get the most money out of people when people were coming to you trying to buy a commercial asset?
Maybe take a step back. When you get a seller come to you, what are the steps you go through to make the sale? So do you look at the lease? Do you can we bump up the rent here? What can we massage? If it's an owner occupier one, what can we do? Maybe just when they first come to you, what are your first thoughts when you're lining up to sell it?
Yeah, when they first come to you, the number one thing you obviously get is the lay of the land. What are we dealing with? Is a lease about to expire, and do you want to maybe not renew the lease with a tenant? And let's talk about what you can get for it vacant. And then, other times the situation, depending what the market's doing, is more beneficial to renew a lease, get the lease, rate right. And then, then you go sell it as a lease investment. At different points across my career, like when I started, leased investments were much better than a vacant possession building. If you had a lease investment, you were winning. You could sell it at a great rate, and away you went. If it was later part of my year, particularly post COVID, we hit a 2-speed market in Brisbane. So I should say I'm again north side of Brisbane. I don't know if I said that before, but in Brisbane we had a 2-speed market where particularly just before I joined Policey, the year prior to that, lease investments were selling, on average for 10% less than what you could get if it was vacant. There was this premium on vacant possession properties. So we just address that, and find out what the lay of the land was, figure out what the best road forward was there, and then we'd have a chat about process. So everyone has an idea on what the best way is to sell a property, I found. So as an agent, I would always say, look, have you given any thought about how you want to approach this matter? And as an agent, like one of your first goals is to actually get appointed, because if you don't get appointed, you've got no property to sell. And then if you've got no property to sell, you ain't getting paid. So I found it really handy to understand what they wanted. But if the opportunity was there, we'd run them through a process about, what the best way is to go. And really the best way to sell an asset at a great price is to create competition around it. So what we like to do at Rain and Horn, they're a big auction office. People have different opinions about auctions. So auctions it's a bad way to buy, typically, because it'll force you to put your best foot forward. But it's a great way to sell. And one of the big benefits of selling under auction conditions is you're buying an asset like as is, where is, that's it. Like there's no questions asked. If you are the winning bidder, you are buying it and you're settling in 30 days. That's it. So it's a great way to sell an asset if you can get the right price. But what I would do with our clients is I'd just run through a process and say, look, when you go to market, whether it's for auction, expression of interest with the closing date, or private treaty, what we're trying to do is just create competition and seeing if we can get a deal done on the best terms possible for you as a seller. And we just run through that process. And people are like, well, what happens if I don't sell at auction? It's like, well, auction's really, in commercial, auction is really just the first 5-6 weeks of the process when we go to market. So why don't we go to market? Let's take great photos. Let's advertise it correctly. Make sure the property's ready to go before we do that. And, over that first 5-6 weeks, let's just get as much interest as we can, and then try and get as many people in the room as possible. And one or two things are going to happen. We're either going to sell quickly to someone that just doesn't want to run the risk of going to auction. And if that's the case, great. Second step is we go to auction and we bid it out and see where we end up. And if we end up at a price that you're happy with, great. We're sold. 30 days later, it's settled. No questions asked. And then if we end up passing in at auction, that's what people get really scared about. But that's just really, if you don't sell at auction, you just end up in an expression of interest situation where if we don't have unconditional buyers in the room, that's okay. We're probably going to have a handful of guys that are conditional that will need due diligence or finance or bits and pieces. And then at that point, we'll consider their offers, and then really if there's something odd happening and the property is just not, an interest to a lot of people, that's when you would end up at private treaty and on the market. But that would be rare. Like normally you're either selling cash unconditional to someone, or you're then taking a conditional offer from some very genuine buyer that just needs finance, and away you go, So we're just walking through the process, deciding what they're more comfortable with. Often there'd be, someone would like one way more than the other. Often someone's had a really bad experience with auctions. So you talk through those objections and get a game plan together, and away you go. So
I just want to say,
I was going to say with commercial, most our Brisbane ones, and Queensland ones, you go under contract subject to due diligence.
Yeah.
So is auction just a way to get rid of that? And then if you are going to auction, you have to give much more information. I imagine you got to package up a bundle of here's all the details you need to make your bid if you want, obviously, an unconditional auction.
Yeah, well, the rules have just changed in Queensland massively. We're just working through that now. But previously, the way we would do it was we get an IM together and we get as much information as we could, because the more information you provide up front, the easier it is to sell unconditionally. But we try and get plans together, all your statutory outgoings, management fees, kind of as much as you could disclose as possible, just to say, look, this is what it's going to look like if you buy it. Leases, everything like that. You provide it all in the IM. Send that out to people, let them do their own due diligence in that 5-6 week period, And then if they like it enough, then they would come to the auction and make their bids.
So. Has the vendor disclosure also impacted the commercial space? Because I know that I was reading one the other day. Heather Jordan mentioned there was like 190 pages of information she had to prepare for a sale. So that's with commercial property as well, is it?
I think let's save that till the end. We've been chatting for hours and hours in Policey Property about that. So I think Nick can kind of sum it up at the end. Otherwise, we'll go off on a tangent.
He's had enough. He's going to throw the toys out of the cot if we start talking about that. I love, guys, if you want to learn more about cash flow from commercial and how to increase and maximize that, drop a fire emoji. I love that fire emoji. So pump the algorithm if we want to. But anyway, maybe not. I want a Renaissance Gorilla. I love these names. Like, it looks like that looks a photo of Truman, maybe. I don't know, one of the presidents, I think. So you said, has the recent interest rate drop impacted the commercial property space? Which price space is worth investing in right now or within the next 6 months? Gee, why 6 months for Renaissance Gorilla? Are you in the market for one, or what's the 6 month thing? Just kind of, yeah. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, this is probably a Steve and a Mick question.
I'll let Michael answer first because I know my answer.
Sorry, I messed up my my presidents and prime ministers. Sorry, Renaissance. I apologize.
What was the impact? Look, yields are just going to tighten. I think that's what we've already kind of seen happening. You know, what was 5.7% yields on a lot of industrial assets are now sitting at 5.5%. As money gets a little bit cheaper, people are going to naturally spend a little bit more. Whether that's sustainable, I mean, who knows? But I think in the short term to the near term, it's definitely going to tighten. So I don't know what Steve thinks, but that's kind of what we're seeing already with some of the transactions we're getting across our table.
It's one lever that changes demand. And obviously, if you get more cash flow for your property, you're going to pay more for the same deal. But like counterintuitively, when interest rates have been rising for 5 years, prices were still growing anyway. So it's not a linear relationship. There's more to it. There's still supply and demand. It just brings more demand. So it's just going to keep tightening. We can tell you there's all stock out there at the moment. So it's getting harder and harder. The other question about price point, I always say this facetiously, what you can afford. Because if you can't afford it, who cares? Like, you're not going to save to go from a 2 mil to a 5 mil. So you buy what you can afford.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you that was one of our sessions we've done, like, what price should you buy commercial at? And you told me that was something they've already asked. I didn't necessarily believe you. And we will there's been some great questions come through on YouTube
I've
Facebook
got Facebook
as well.
open. There's a good one from Angela Flannery, who I know very well. She's asked, what were the typical reasons people are looking to actually sell?
Why would they be looking to sell?
Yeah, like, why we get asked that all the time. Like when we present a property to a client, they always go, why is the owner selling? Like, why typically did you see when you're a selling agent the reasons for selling?
It's a good question.
Look, to be brutally honest, it was normally divorce or death.
Not even distress, just divorce or death.
Like sometimes distress. Like if we, off the back of these rate cuts, if in 2 years' time we see rapid rate rises again because something's wrong in the economy, for sure, people will have to offload property. But day to day, it's normally, dad's died, he managed the estate. We get quite a lot of this. Mum's selling the asset and just doesn't want to manage it. It's easier for her to offload the asset and have cash, and then they're thinking about, like, how do we disperse this to the children? It's much easier to separate cash than it is property. See a lot of that. And to that point, like, there's quite a few retirees that I would deal with where they were just literally doing that. Like, I don't know if it's the best way forward for Australia, but they seem to want to sell on the assets and then split the cash up evenly to their kids, rather than actually try and keep the assets together in a trust for the family long term. That it just seems to be what people do. So,
gee, this is interesting. I didn't expect it to go in that direction, and there's been a great question from Julie, but Elijah has said, controversially, he said, are commercial properties about to see a 50% downtrend? Are those doomsayers of property finally going to be right? I don't think so, but yield is lowering. So I don't think price, as yield lowers, doesn't price increase? If I get that right, or if I get that wrong again, Steve?
Yeah, for the same rent. For the same rent, yes. So I'm not sure if they're referring to yields are coming down and then we're going to see the price drop as well. But it's just one lever in the whole economy. I imagine they're alluding to that the economy is going to turn. But if there's no industrial properties, no retail, no office space, how are you paying your rent?
Yeah, good question. Yeah.
People forget too, like, sorry, we've got like a housing shortage that everyone's talking about because there's such a supply of people coming in. Like where I live in Brisbane, the whole of Brisbane is run largely on small business. And there's just a lack of commercial stock anywhere. Like industrial, you see that with the tightest yields around. And one of the reasons for that is because there's just not enough of it. And as Brisbane grows, or another major city grows, Sydney, Melbourne, wherever, that demand's going to be even greater, I think, on commercial assets than it will be on housing. They seem to not adequately plan for that in most local areas. So.
Sorry, Jeff, I was going to say, I went to the Sunshine Coast Town Hall meeting for commercial, like 4 years ago, whenever it was, and they ran out of stock. What they were supposed to last until 2030, they had already filled up and exacerbated. So it's just complete undersupply. Yeah. But even like most of Brisbane and that, Mick, anyway, like you sell the property vacant, you get a better price. So how's things bad when a vacant property sells for more? Because it means businesses are flourishing. They want the space more than a tenant does.
Yeah, 100%. There's just that much business out there. People need a place to have their business, and it's really buoyant. So, it's a bad day anywhere in Australia if business is not needing a place to operate from. That's a really bad day, and I just don't see that really happening personally.
Yeah, that was a great question from Julie as well, and we sort of touched on a touch. But when and why would it be worth more as a vacant property? Is it because you can then improve the asset, or like what's the drive behind it being worth more as a vacant property?
Demand, owner-occupier demand. So owner-occupiers, at least in Brisbane, have really cottoned onto the fact that I can go buy an asset in my super and rent it off myself. I can pay myself rent, and all their accountants are saying, don't pay rent, go buy something. And then if there's enough of that getting around, it just creates demand, and you've got a short supply of stock, so they bid higher. Investors are limited on a return basis, like what I need for return, but when it's vacant, a business like, I'll pay it, I'll get it.
Yeah. And just the savings from the self-managed super fund anyway, from tax, it gives them an extra premium anyway, so they're still in front.
Yeah. We should do a session on this best asset you can buy if you like boring investments, and after this we'll go around the grounds, and because Mick, you gave some very insightful and interesting on the various on. I think you have quite a contrarian view on office space and warehouse and retail as well. So I kind of want to hear about your views on that as off the back of our conversation last Friday. So just to give you a bit of a flavor and a heads up in case I'm springing that on you a little bit. But best asset you can buy if you like boring investments, Mick. What do you reckon?
I mean, industrial is probably the most boring investment out there. You pay a premium for it, but you got 4 concrete walls and an office. If you're lucky.
Has Steve trained you to say that? Because that sounds very. Or did you train Steve? Who's training who here?
Sorry, he's just an AI bot. He's not. He doesn't even work for me. He's just an AI bot.
Real.
Great to give the illusion that I have workers.
It's just Steve.
That's right.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Because 10 years ago, you guys have sort of been around more than 10 years in this space. So was that sort of warehouse was seen as the ugly duckling, wasn't it? What was warehouse like 10 years ago?
I mean, it was good. You could get 7.5% returns in Brisbane.
Can't do that now, though, can you?
No, not a purchase.
You're lucky if you get a 5 in front of it, Jeff.
Asking for a friend. No, I want a 6.5% yield, and I want a 1. Anyway, so best asset.
On a side note, Jeff, you know what's funny? When I first started buying commercial 6-7 years ago, and I'd present a property at 7.2%, and they'd say they want 7.5. Then it came down and we're buying in Brisbane at 6.5, and they wanted 7. And it's always push. It's never just like, let's buy a good quality asset and hold it long term.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had that conversation the other day with somebody who was like, they invest in New Zealand, and now they're like coming to Australia, and they're like, oh, I want to go and get an 8%. I'm doing the Joe. I'm getting the clip in, getting the Instagram thing in, YouTube. But I hope he's watching. And they came to me 3 or 4 days later and said, oh, actually, I think I can just do that in New Zealand. In Australia, I'm going to focus on capital growth. I'm not going to worry about trying to get an 8 or 9% yield. I'm just going to I think capital growth is the game here in Australia, at least for residential. But on that note, I mentioned that because, on your point of sort of the race to the bottom or the race to the top as to get the best kind of yield or highest yield rather than the best asset. That's a conversation in and of itself. But Mick, I want to know, so what were your views on office space in Brisbane? Because I suppose that's where you did a little bit around, and then take us through office space and then warehouse and then retail, because I think you had some very I suppose, expert views on this?
I can't truly remember what we talked about, but it's
I remember it, but yeah, I didn't record it, but I remember it. Yeah.
Office in Brisbane. Yeah. Like, what's my views on that as a whole? Okay, cool. Yeah. So office in CBD, and this is true in other areas as well, is, I remember what I said now. Office in the CBD is a little bit like The Big Short. Everyone's doing massive incentives, and it's a big game of hot potato where they're trying to pass the asset on to someone else or a big managed fund, and they're trying to keep values really, really high. So as an example, if you've got $1,000 a square meter on rent, sometimes there can be up to 40, 50% incentive in that. So the actual net figure you're actually getting on the lease, if you're the one cutting the deal as an owner, you're getting like $500 a square meter, but that keeps your rent high, which means it keeps your valuations high. And everyone's just hoping that, the demand will be there in the CBD. And to that point, it probably will be, but there's times it kind of ebbs and flows. Like, obviously COVID's a great example. Like, there was vacancy everywhere. It was a really hard time. People had to cut some pretty hefty deals to get tenants into their buildings. But what I've seen over the last 10 years too is that these guys that cut these deals, they're often, if you hold it long enough, it recovers, and they can work their way through it. So, probably a Big Short's a bit aggressive to say that, but there's definitely a game people are playing to keep their valuations high in the CBD, to keep everything floating well. And that's interesting because, when people talk about office gets a really bad rap, but because it gets tied into with that. But if you actually take office into like a suburban area, some of these small office areas, like in industrial areas or, a neighborhood center, those kind of things, they can be really good assets, and they're not the same as buying an office in the CBD. You'll still have incentives tied in with them, but they're nowhere near as aggressive. So, it gets a bit of a bad name. Office isn't going anywhere. People have, I think, learned now over the last couple of years that not everyone is really good at working from home. They need to get out of the house. They need to show up and actually see people and touch grass and actually go get outside. And, so office isn't going anywhere, But actually some of the most successful investors that I've come across in Brisbane, they're making a play on office. They're buying office because it's on the nose, and they're repositioning it as medical, or they know they can turn it into some sort of neighborhood center with a really good community mix of tenants in there, and they do really well, because they can buy an asset that no one's really looking at. They get the rents up, and then away they go. They've got this equity in their properties, so it can be a really good asset.
Yeah. It's Big Short. We'll just clip that, and that'll be the title for the whole thing. But no, so
please don't make me viral.
he's even a haircut tonight, so he's all ready to make it happen. The virality.
The boss man's got me on. I gotta not look like a hobo.
I want to touch on that because you were talking about how they're inflating rents and stuff. But what typically, like a selling agent, what are the usual tricks? I'm not going to say you did it, but what are the stuff you've seen in the industry for like the stuff we all know, like check all the outgoings and check who pays what and all that normal stuff I talk about as due diligence. But is anything they commonly do? Like, do they just bump up the rent a little bit, or do they do under the table payments where the tenant or the owner don't actually share funds? They just kind of say, oh, the rent's this, and it's not actually sharing. They don't have the rental ledger. Like, what are the usual tricks you've seen from let's say the snaky agents? We get the ones all the time where there's multiple selling agents. What's your thoughts on that?
Stuffed about questions there in one.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. Which one? So multiple selling agents is an interesting one. So there's a misconception in the market where sellers will want to sell a property, and they think that the best way to do that, and this is the same for leasing too, they think that the best way they can do that is to get 5 or 6 agents running around on the property, and like, surely if I get everyone involved, I'm going to get the absolute, best rate here. But what they end up doing is just getting 5 or 6 people just putting misinformation out there about their property, and they'll end up getting 5 or 6 guys that really aren't working in their best interests. So that's an interesting one. I mean, we'll often see a property pop up with a few agents, and they're just effectively casting a rod, trying to catch a fish. Just trying to cut a deal. They're actually not working in the best interest of the seller, in my opinion. Because if you're going to do that for the seller, if you're actually going to sell a property properly, you want to create as much competition around it as you can, just to drive the best price. But yeah, what was the other thing you asked? I can't remember.
He's talking about what are the snaky agents using as tactics to sort of catch people out? Are they doing under the table deals, or where you sort of the rent is inflated, but actually in reality they're giving a discount incentive to sort of what sort of things are they doing to offload stock and get the best price to their vendors?
Look, probably, I mean, there's very few ways to be sneaky. Like if you do your checks, you'll find out most things, which is what we do in due diligence. Like if you ask the right questions, you'll get the answers. But probably one of the ways people can get caught is if there's a side deed attached to a lease. So the lease itself reads really, really cleanly, but there's been a big incentive on the side. And if they don't check their rental rates, so the main reason people will get caught buying a data asset is if the rent's just inflated, and they haven't actually compared that to market rates, really. Part of what we do is we check that just to make sure that rents are appropriate, because the way you get really caught in commercials, if you buy an asset that, let's just say, the rental rates 300 a square meter, but the average in the area is 200, that's a big issue if the tenant goes bad, or, even if they don't go bad, even they see out their lease, and then all of a sudden you've got to reset your rent, it's 30% less. Like that has a big impact on the property value. Particularly if you bought as an investment based on the return, and you haven't done your checks. But I don't actually think there's too many ways to get caught out. I mean, another play. Well,
are you saying buying commercial property is easy, Mick? Gee, that's not what we want to do.
It's not easy. Like, look, agents, when they sell, they're very good at saying, yeah, look, all outgoings are recovered, right? Or this is what the outgoings are. But when you go through it, there's a process just to understand what my true cost is on the property. So you're required in real estate to disclose what the statutory outgoings are, like rates, water, levies, all that kind of stuff. But if they don't understand what else might come into that, like property management or, additional cleaning fees, or, even common property costs that just maybe not be covered under the leases. There's little things like that can really bring your net return down. And that's where people can really get
insurance.
Yeah, insurance. Yeah, insurance is a good one. Yep.
Can I ask an interesting one about land tax? Like, typically, is there? I mean, this is state by state, of course. So, not go and seek your solicitor and conveyancer advice. But typically, who sort of pays that land tax? Is it in the lease? Who pays it, or where does that sort of crop up?
Normally in the lease. Yeah. So normally there's a clause in the lease to say that land tax is recoverable under the outgoings, but that can be a little bit
Victoria. There's the Retail Act, though. Is there something about you that there is something that you can't charge it as a landlord in Victoria for retail, or was I misreading that?
No. So different states charge in different ways. So in some states you can't recover management, in other states you can't recover land tax under the Retail Act. And the tricky thing with the Retail Act too is there's a disclosure statement which overrides the lease. So sometimes you can get a lease. This is where people can get caught too. Like if you have a lease that says all outgoings are recoverable, it's like, great, I've got this lease, it's in writing, it's all signed. But if there's a disclosure statement that also says no outgoings are recoverable, if they want to fight that in court, and it does happen, but if they want to fight that in court, they can go, hey, here's a disclosure statement. It says nothing's recoverable. That will take precedent over the lease. So you've got to read the two documents together to make sure it makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. That's interesting. There's some great questions pop up on YouTube. There's been people are loving this session. It's just it's crazy. So Ash just said, why does everybody want? This is to Steve's point about 5 minutes ago. Long term, you will go to 6 to 7% eventually anyway. And if the asset is good, I don't know necessarily will go to 6 to 7, because if the asset increases in value but the rent doesn't at the same pace, anything above 5 is good, isn't it? Toilet paper is going down every day. I don't know what toilet paper's got to do with the price.
We're talking about inflation. He's talking about the price. Inflation's killing the value, which is right. He's 100% spot on. Come work for Policey Property. Yeah.
Everybody's hiring. I saw. I mean, if Joe was here, wouldn't like me saying it, but bloody Investo is hiring, and Scotty A is hiring. Everybody's hiring. Geez, when do I mean, I don't need a job. I'm okay. I'm good. And this one's just come through. This is the age-old question. I want both your views on this, because I know, Steve, hopefully you don't fall asleep, because you've answered this probably every second sales call, but commercial versus real estate, commercial versus resi house at 8 to 1 million price range. Is there commercial investments make sense for retail investors, 2 to 3 million resi portfolios to go down commercial path for cash flow and divers? And Mick, you and I were speaking about Diversity is, I imagine that would be diversification. Mick, you and I were talking about this the other day, where there's that bit of a flight to commercial, and it's the residential investor is saying, well, okay, commercial looks a little bit sexy. It's a bright, shiny object. And that's sort of, are you sort of seeing some investors come in to your neck of the woods who are doing that? They're saying, I'm sick and tired of resi. It's now time to go across to commercial. Is that what you're sort of seeing? That's a different question to this one, but yeah. What do you reckon about this one, Mick? Sorry.
Look, most people seem to make the jump. We spoke about this the other day, but most people seem to make the jump because they've got, a decent portfolio, but they're just not getting the cash flow from it. So all their value is tied up in equity, which is nice, but you only get that money if you actually sell the assets. So I know Steve did a similar thing, with what he did. He sold some resi to reposition into commercial, and that cash flow is a much greater benefit to him now than it is, tied up in a property. So yeah, most people are making that jump. The general play seems to be buy a couple of resi and then sell one or two down, so you got your deposit to get into commercial, and that seems to be the biggest hurdle for most people, just to get the deposit together, really.
Yeah. What do you think, Steve, as somebody who sort of trod a similar path yourself? I mean, I think you grew it to probably 7 or 8 million, whatever it was, or 6 million. Post speed trim, but what's your line of thinking on that? Does it come down to the goals, or is that kind of the cliched response? Are you going to give us a cliche? What Steve?
Yeah, I'll give you the cliche. I'll give you the usual cliche response. What you're trying to achieve over what time frame versus what you got to work with, which I say on every single one. But a lot of our clients, Mick was alluding to, they sold a couple of resis. The other ones, we get a lot of club 50 to 60, where they're looking at their super and stuff, being like, oh, geez, I don't have much cash flow. Looking at their resi portfolio they've built in the last 5 years, being like, well, this thing's still negative. When's it going to start giving me an income? And then they make the shift there. So you are the only negative of commercial, because you get the same cash flow, or 3 times the cash flow, the exact same capital growth, more. Sydney Industrial outperformed resi in all of Australia. So you can still get more capital growth. You just don't get the leverage. So if you're starting out, leverage up to the eyeballs, get your 90%, get your 80%. Commercial, if you're typically 70% and below, you don't get the leverage. That's the only negative with commercial. And if you don't know what you're doing, you'll get burnt, which Mick sees all day, every day when he finds things wrong with the properties.
I'm just going to say, I'm going to get a little copy. This is information general. Do not go and necessarily leverage up to the airballs. Go and speak to your accountant and brokers. I mean, sometimes that's the information we give to people as well. But
get all your cash, 50% in Bitcoin, 50% in commercial. Just stop, retire.
Okay. I mean, if Gurav's watching, he'll be throwing his dinner at the TV because you're not talking about it.
There's a good question on Facebook about where do we see Brisbane post. What is it? Brisbane
I wasn't going to touch that one.
Olympics.
We're actually subscribe, because next week is about Brisbane. We're going to talk Brisbane and what's going on at the moment. But 10 years time, who knows? My hair might be a little bit grayer. Hopefully, Mick, you're only 21, so mate, you started working in property at 10, so you still have your full. I don't know what please he'd be doing. He'd be in Hawaii, but what do you think about Brisbane in 10 years time?
In 10 years time, look, I think Homebush is probably the best way to assess that. I think Brisbane's going to go pretty hard until the Olympics, and then I think it's only natural that there might be a little bit of a cooling off. But I think it's important for people to understand that the reason property will remain buoyant is it will go up in value against the dollar. Like, the reason property works so well is that as the dollar debases, assets go up against that. So they're never going to stop debasing the dollar, and so assets will just continue to decline. So they might cool off a little bit after the Olympics, I imagine, but there's still going to be demand. People are still going to be living in Brisbane and Greater Brisbane, and I imagine there's still going to be a shortage. I can't see them solving that problem. So you combine that all together, and assets will be just fine, I would think.
How do we? What is the? I mean, this is a different conversation. We need to talk about how to maximize your returns, because people want to make more money, don't they? Matty Brand says too slow. What do I do now? 95%. Matty Brand, if you're doing that, maybe take yourself a time out in the whatever. We're just going to say, because how does the borrowing capacity keep on keeping up with incomes not increasing? Is it a bifurcation of the haves versus the have-nots, Steve? Is that because how do people keep affording these $1 million properties in 10 years' time?
We've been saying this for 40 years, and they've quadrupled, 5 times in the last.
But there was a transition from the single income household to double income household. What is it going to be?
That explains one cycle. What about the other 3 to 5? It's still going to be supply and demand. What is this going to? Well, this is what I see. I always use other countries as an example. I've spent a lot of time in the UK now. Is it just shifts from owner-occupied market to investor markets, which give it another one. It's like saying, how do shares keep going up? Like people's incomes aren't going the same, but why do shares go up? Like it's still supply and demand. If there's more demand, people will pay a premium for it.
You could argue, but that's because the underlying the business is growing. Whereas it's like, what is the Anyway, we should get bloody David Gow or somebody. I don't know, somebody. We should get Warren Buffett. When is Warren coming on the show? Warren, he doesn't answer my emails, so he probably Anyway, better get him on the show in the next couple of years. But we'll get to your question, Angela. You're very, very excited. And then I wanted to know about how to maximize your returns mix. So sorry, because you are the star of the show here. So sorry about talking about Warren Buffett. Is it beneficial to own your commercial asset and you also own the business that operates out of the asset? Could you manipulate the value? Oh, geez. I should have proofread this question before. Speak to your accountant on this. Is it? Okay. I feel a little bit vulnerable asking this question, a little bit exposed by this one. What do you think, Mick? Because you've probably seen this a little bit, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. Could they manipulate the valuation? Yeah, sure, to a degree. But there are checks and balances that have to be done. They have to justify their rent they're paying themselves. They can't just double their rent. So you need to justify the rent you are paying yourself. But people do definitely stretch the friendship for sure. You know,
not when Polizzi comes into the Polizzi and Mick as head of due diligence come into the equation. You guys are absolutely sort of making sure that everything's buttoned up and your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. So I'm sure that, but yeah, I think that probably would have been more prevalent maybe 10 to 15 years ago, was it? Or is it still happening quite a lot? Is it harder to get away with now?
There's definitely, you can't get away with it. Like there's checks and balances in it, but yeah, if someone wants to pay themselves extra for a time, people do it, and then they get slapped over the wrist from the ATO. You know, you can't do it. Like you can't do it long term. But people do stretch the friendship. They can't do it. But will it materially affect their valuation? No. It just means they could probably, in a super fund situation, they probably put a bit of extra funds into their super fund. You know, but that's why there's checks and balances there. You know, because they have to justify the price that they're paying themselves. You can't just. There's not a loophole to give you, pour infinite amounts of money into your super fund, for example. Like people can't do that.
Yeah. So. And this is and we'll talk about. Sorry, we're already 40 minutes, so sorry. We need to talk about maximizing. But so this is a question from Beck, and I love. So Beck, we're going to get on the show at some stage, but she said not to be stupid. Who is giving the incentive? The owner. So that's the rental incentive. That's kind of where you're amortizing. Is that what we were talking about there? Or are they accessing some kind of government grant or government thing? It's the incentive from the landlord, isn't it, Mick?
Yeah. So different assets will, incur different sorts of incentives. Steve can probably weigh in on this a little bit as well. But if you want to do a broad covering, so industrial assets will typically have some sort of rent-free incentive when you're signing a lease. Sometimes not at all, depending on how hot the market is. Industrial is pretty straightforward. People are, they're leasing a box and they want to store things in that box, and it's pretty straightforward. If you own a retail asset, those type of businesses typically have larger setup costs. Some sort of shop, some sort of butcher, baker, whatever you're putting in there.
Candlestick maker.
Yeah, exactly. And they will sometimes come and say, "Look, I like the asset. I want to lease it for X rate, but I'm going to have to spend 50 grand on my fit out. Can you throw me 20 grand in fit out incentive? And if the owner wants to cut the deal because he knows he can massage the rent and get a slightly better rate, he might do that deal. But it's all going to make sense. So most owners won't just do incentive for the fun of it. They want to make sure, like, well, if I'm going to help you out to get you into my building, then I want to make sure that I'm getting compensated on the other end for, with my rent. My rent can't be lacking. And then in my leasing days, I'd always tell tenants, because tenants want to ask for the world, like, I want rent free, I want fit out incentive, and I want a cheap rate. And I'm like, look, you'll get something. You're not going to get everything. You can either get rent free, and everything else has to be normal, or you can get a cheap rate, but you're not going to get any incentive, or you choose, and you just kind of have to work through that process and try and let common sense prevail through that process.
It makes sense for, so like you said, industrial's a box. Like they can come in typically within a couple of days. Once they put up their pallet racks and stuff, they're good to go.
Yeah.
But like a retail shop, I've just got one recently. I owned one where we're putting a nail salon in, and I gave them 2 months free rent because they're also not earning income while they're doing the setup, while they're doing all the chairs and painting tiles and stuff. And then they weren't finished in the 2 months, and they said, "We're not finished. Can we have another month?" And I gave it to them. Whether or not I was being paid another thing, but it ended up being like $1,500 or $2,000 or whatever it was. So I gave it to them. So they got 3 months. But they signed a 5-year lease, and that's the incentive for me. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you this, but you need to sign me a big lease because that's what's obviously going to make the property really attractive to a valuer.
Yeah, nice. But there's something else in that too. Like, there's a lot to be gained by the tenant feeling like they can talk to you and figure things out. Because sometimes I deal with these hardline owners, and all they did, they thought they were doing the best thing for themselves, but all they did was just create drama and make life hard for themselves. Like, if you can get along with your tenants appropriately, it just helps you have a good asset that's easy to manage moving forward. So
in reality, they're always going to pay market rent anyway, so why not treat them nice so they treat you nice?
Yeah, that's I wanted. Okay, let's get to these. How do you maximize? What are the ways in which somebody maximizes their commercial property return? And then we'll talk about de-risking the lease sort of situation on the end. So, what are the things that investors and new owners need to be doing or considering, especially when transitioning out of residential into commercial, because they may not know these things.
Yeah, I'd be really keen on Steve's thoughts on this, but I think he's got the same thinking as me. Probably one of the big.
So yeah, he has the same thing as you. Yeah, you've got the thoughts, mate.
I'm the host today. I'm the host today. I'm not asking the questions.
No, I'm involving you in the conversation, mate. I think one of the biggest silent killers of returns is vacancy, unnecessary vacancy. So as an agent, I would always come up against these owners, and they're lovely people, but they wouldn't. Not always lovely, I should say, but yeah, most of them, they're really genuine people, but they feel like the best way to get the best return on their asset is to chase top of market rent, and be really picky about the type of tenant that they're going to get in their building. And what they don't realize that they're doing is that they're just killing the opportunity to get a deal done in the first month. You know, the amount of times that I could have cut deals on assets with a tenant at a great rate, but the owner had said to me, like, I don't like that type of tenant. I think it's gonna be a bad tenant for my building. Like, and to the point, I remember one lady I had once who didn't want dynamo bolts put into her warehouse floor because it was going to damage her property, but you need to bolt down racking. And so she sat on the market for like literally a year because she just kept knocking back tenants. And I didn't understand it because, like, it only takes a few months of vacancy and you've just nuked your return for the year. Like, you're far better off cutting a deal, even if it's slightly under market. Like, some of the best and most successful owners that I've ever dealt with would intentionally just undercut the market when they had a vacancy. So if like the market rate's $200 a square, they'll go, I'll put it up for 180. And then you're guaranteed that any tenant in the area will be looking at your property. And then you just take your pick. And those guys would typically lease their assets, particularly industrial-wise, within a couple of weeks. So they've completely minimized their downtime. And that slight discount in rent that they've given has been completely negated because you only need 1 extra month of vacancy and you've lost more, you know? So that's one of the biggest silent killers I've seen of return. Like, getting that filled quickly is the biggest way to have a great asset, you know. So
people do the same thing in residential as well. They'll say, okay, the market's telling me I can get 600. I think the property manager's telling me I can get 600, but the market's telling me you get 570. And they're like, oh, I'm going to hold out for 4 weeks to get this 600 unicorn sort of tenant. And then they've lost more than what they would have gained, because you're talking $30 over a month is let's say 3 times 4, that's $120. So every week it's vacant is costing you that money. So yeah, you're exactly right. But Steve, you had something enlightening.
I think further mixed point is if you've got fair rent or below market rent as well, they're not going to push as hard with the incentives. So you might actually save yourself 3 months free rent as well. So you kind of win on two fronts. Is there something, my sample side's quite small for this, but like anytime I've personally owned one that's went vacant, when I advertise, I always get like 2 or 3 applicants in the first month. And if the times I've said no to them, then it's real quiet for like 2 or 3 months, and you do exactly what you've been like, shit, have I done something wrong here? Is that just when a new property comes on, you get more interest? Is that normally what happens? Or
we just highlight that Steve said his sample size is small.
For vacant properties, for properties going vacant. Because I buy tenanted properties, so you have to wait years for them to actually go vacant.
Yeah, no, I would. Yeah.
Yeah, look, there's an old saying which is true that sometimes your first buyer is your best buyer, and that's the same with leasing. Like sometimes your first offer for lease is your best offer because people don't realize that tenant's been looking for 6 months and they haven't been able to find the asset, and they'll come in hot off the gate, and then I've had it heaps of times. It's like, oh, I don't know, should I really take this? I don't know, yes, take this offer. I've been talking to them for 6 months. We're not going to get better, but because they've had no exposure, they haven't had that downtime of like, oh crap, getting to the point where I'm like, I'll take the next tenant. It can kind of hurt you. Yeah.
Maybe that's why, because there's more level of desperation. So when a new property does come on for lease, that's why they're onto it straight away. Whereas the ones that were like 4 months left on their lease or whatever probably don't have the same urgency yet.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's not hard. I should say it is hard to find an asset that will suit your business. So business owners aren't dumb. They know what they want. They know what they need. And if the right thing comes up, they'll have a crack. And typically they're pretty well versed in what market rates are. So they'll make a reasonable offer if they're a decent human. But yeah, that's probably why you've seen, offers come in straight away and then a bit of a lull, because those 3 tenants were probably the main tenants in the area that were suitable for your property. So, it doesn't mean you always got to take that offer, but often they can be your best tenant to deal with. So, and if you can get them into your building, like the hardest part of leasing anything is actually getting them in your building. Once they're in your building, they will only move if they have to or if they go broke, because it's just so expensive to move. Like even if they get a slight discount on rent somewhere, it's still going to cost them an absolute bomb to move their business. Like it's not a fun process for anyone to go through. So getting them into your building is half the battle.
Yep.
Yeah. I actually remember when I was an engineer and we had to move office buildings. In my head at the time, I was just like, oh, this is going to be easy. Just move. It was like a proper get a project manager 6-month saga, transferring over the servers and data rooms and blah, blah, blah. Like it was a proper saga.
Yep.
I want you guys to think about the things that new to commercial property owners, the mistakes they make about that cause that. We've talked about a few of those, but be good for those newer to commercial property to understand those. First off, we're gonna throw to our first sponsor for the night, and he's giving away a free book, so stay tuned.
Oh, Jeff, I wish there was 3 investing books that covered everything property.
Oh, Joe, there is. Steve has 3 books now.
That I do, guys. I've got 3 books now. You probably don't even have to follow this group anymore. Just kidding. You want to keep seeing and hearing from me, of course, so stay involved. But in all seriousness, if you want to get the full picture of investing, residential, commercial, and development, these 3 books have you covered for the fundamentals. For AusProp members, here's the best part. I'm giving these books to you for free. Just cover the postage and I'll send them right to your door. Go to policyproperty.com or click the link below and get your copies today. You can also get all my spreadsheets, checklists, and resources free on my website. Happy reading, gang.
We're back. That's a short and sharp sort of thing. Senior corporate leaders' salary packages have increased. Here we go. This is a reason why it's low-wage workers where that's interesting. Churchill's very thoughtful. Renaissance Gorilla. I keep calling Gorilla. I was going to say, if you want to check us out in person, there is going to be many nuggets shared from Steve Polizzi, and there's going to be a user-paid dinner afterwards as well at the Oz Property Insights event. Get your tickets because they are selling quick. So jump on those, team. It's going to be an exciting event. But get Steve's book as well. He's going to be signing copies, I hear. And I don't have a book.
You get all 3 for coming anyway. I'm going to have like 1,000 books there.
Do you?
Yeah,
you get all 3 I hope you better be signing, Steve. If you're not signing mine, I'm not coming. So
no, don't.
At least sign mine. So Mick, before I asked a question about what were the mistakes that newcomers, what are the errors that they're making when they're getting into their commercial property investing journey? What are those due diligence things, or when they're cutting the deal, negotiating a lease, what should they be avoiding or doing instead of not avoiding?
So you're talking about once they own the asset, or when
or as they're getting into it and throughout the journey, what are those things that they sort of they miss out on doing, which they should be really doing?
What are the rookie mistakes that you find novice investors do for the commercial?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on the buying side, just not understanding their outgoings. Really, that's the biggest thing that hurts any investor. But once they own the asset, look, one of my pet hates when I was an agent was that an owner would appoint 5 or 6 agents to go find the best result for their property, and then what they would effectively have is 5 or 6 different sets of information on the market. There would be an expectation from tenants on the market that there might be something wrong with that property because everyone's advertising it. And what they think they got the best chance of getting a deal done because they're listed with so many people, but actually what they effectively achieve is you'll end up getting 4 or 5 agents just quiet quitting on it. They'll throw an ad and do 0 work on the property, and then there might be 1 or 2 agents that are actually working with intent to try and get the deal done because they think you can get it done. I think a better way, and one of the best things an investor can do if they have a vacancy coming up, is actually get on Real Commercial and just find out who's the leading agent in the area. Like there'll be someone that has probably 60 or 70% market share in most areas, and engage those guys. They'll typically be more expensive, but get them to advertise your property because they're almost guaranteed to be dealing with every tenant in the market. And then if you can do those couple of things we touched on, is like maybe just advertise your property a little bit cheaper. You can bet your bottom dollar that any tenant they got looking is going to see your property, and if you've exclusively appointed them to do the job, they'll typically get it done much faster. I'll never forget, we did a study on a review, I should say, on everything that we leased over the course of a year, and it was a few hundred leases, like big and small, and the properties that were openly listed took twice as long to lease. And the only thing we could put it down to was the fact that the properties that were exclusively on the books with us, and we were the only ones working on it, we just naturally felt the pressure to get them done, and we got them done. So any tenant that was looking, we were just throwing them at this property, and naturally you just end up getting deals done faster, which is a great result for the owner. So I think it's one of the best things you can do is like not multi-list it. Just make sure you get the best agent in the area running your property and price it appropriately, and don't be too picky on the tenant, and you'll be fine. It'll work out.
Stay true. Yeah, I agree. Show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. Because if there's one that's just been sitting there and it's like 5 agents potentially working on it, it's like, well, where's the urgency? Where's the pressure on me? Somebody will get it listed eventually. And like, there's not even, you sort of don't even know that just because you get a tenant, the landlord might not sign with you. And Elijah, we're going to have the boom location. I mean, he's talking about boom locations. Somebody wants to know boom locations. So if you guys, if you're comfortable sharing where you're sort of seeing a bit of spiciness in the market, not now, but after our next, so people have to stay tuned for that. It'll come. But what I also wanted to know is, what are some of and Steve, you've got a couple of examples of this. I'm sure you've got plenty, Mick. What are some of those where a property goes vacant? How can you then increase is it net lettable area that you can do, or you guys don't want to talk about that because they're too hard to do? Like, what are the ways I can increase my rent on the property? That's what I want to know.
Do you want to go, Steve, or do you want me?
You're the guest, Mick. How are you?
Yeah. What do you see? It's a tough one, maybe.
It depends on the asset, but
okay.
With like everything I just said before is probably really applicable for industrial. Just get a lease quickly. That's the best thing you can do. Yep. Retail and office, there's often the opportunity, if you are going to provide some incentive, to get the incentive amortized across the lease. So as an example, there's a property that I did 2 years ago, North Brisbane, and it had been vacant for a while. It was like a first floor office space, 500 square meters. And we ended up putting a speech pathologist in, like a really successful one in the area, and they were just growing rapidly and really good for the centre. So brought a lot of foot traffic to the centre. So the owner was pretty keen to do the deal. So what we ended up getting, like, I'm just going to round figures, but we ended up the effective market rent was about 100 grand, so 200 a square meter for this first floor office space with parking. But then they asked for about 100 grand worth of incentive to help them with their fit out, because their fit out costs were like 400 grand to fit this thing out properly, because it was just a big open shell office. Had to have new air cons, well, everything kind of had to be redone. So then what he ended up cutting was it was a 5-year lease from memory, and he ended up getting about 20 grand a year added onto the rent. And the way he negotiated it was to actually, so the offer was originally 100 grand on the lease. And he said, look, I'll give you the incentive, but I want your rent to be 120 grand a year so that I can claw back my incentive across 5 years. And then the way he structured with the lease, so what it effectively meant was that his rental rate went from 200 a square meter to about 240 a square meter. So still well within the realms of what was considered acceptable. So it wasn't an inflated rent by any means. But then what that meant is that as he was trying to reposition the asset, if people have never done the calculation, for every $1,000 of net rent on a property on a 6% yield equals $16,000 in cap rate, roughly. So if you have an extra $21,000 coming in on your property a year, it's effectively $320,000 in cap rate you could add to the equation on a very real valuation. And if you do that across a couple of tenancies on a multi-tenancy thing, it can really make a massive difference to your actual valuation. And it's a really cool opportunity people can do, because really I know Steve jokes about this before, like I can make this money from just signing a piece of paper. Like if you get the lease right, you're literally just signing a piece of paper, and then you can add, in this case, 300 grand to your valuation just from a piece of paper. So little things like that can go a long way to improving valuations. You can't overinflate the rent too much, but if you do it right, it can really help. So
I think we should have led with that, like how to make $300,000 in your next commercial property.
Well, I think I want to talk about, so that's the trick. The trick is get them on a reasonable high rent, but give them an incentive to fill in the gaps, knowing that you're going to get the value that way.
Is there just a really genuine conversation? He's like, all right, I could do it, but this is what I need in return. And they went, yeah, that's fair. And away they went. So it just kind of naturally worked out.
Is there a risk though that if you do you need to keep it? I think you've already answered my question, but I'm just curious. Is there a risk that if that particular tenant goes somewhere else or goes bankrupt, goes out of business, that you might struggle to get another tenant to also incentivize, or what's the risk of that situation happening?
I mean, the risk of any sort of cash down incentive is that the tenant goes bad. That's why people tend to prefer cutting their rent or providing rent free, because it's not actual dollars out of your bank. But to effectively spend 100 grand to add 300 grand to your valuation is a trade a lot of owners will make if they have the cash available and they like the tenant enough. So like, this was a speech pathologist. It's largely government backed. It's a fairly safe bet. You don't think they're going to go bad, so you make the bet. You probably wouldn't do it on a snooker hall or something random like that. Like, there's certain tenants you'd do it for, but it can be a really safe way to do it. And as long as you're not making a bet on a tenant that's going to fold next year, it's pretty good. So
yeah. This one, find underlet property. What are your thoughts on that, guys? Do you like it or do you not like it?
I mean, it can be a great way to get a good buy. There's plenty of properties out there where. So it's important for people to understand that leases are the most lagging indicator in the market. So the market will run price-wise. Leases are locked in for 5 years sometimes longer. And whatever the terms of that lease are, that's the girl you brought to the dance. So you're going to dance with it for 5 years and you can't change it until, that lease expires. So that can create a situation where there's assets that are being held back by their leases. So sure, if you can get the funding and you can buy it, and you're really confident that at lease renewal, you can massively improve that rent, it can be a great way to pick up an asset. You just got to be really confident in what that actual real market rent should be. Because if you get that wrong, that's when you can kind of do yourself a disservice.
Yeah, we do it a lot, Jeff, but it's by people who do it all day, every day. So they know exactly what sold last week, 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago. I got a bit of a random question for like warehouses, because you said it's a bit simpler, get it tenanted. But when do you decide, because we all know about building like a mezz floor, like, increase the net lettable area. That's what Jeff said. But what about like when it goes vacant, like, do you ever adjust the property to the market? What I mean by that is like build more office. Like if it's only got like 10% office and you're like, oh, I actually think someone's going to like 30% office? Or do you just wait and then let the tenant decide and then help to have that discussion then?
Yeah, general rule, don't spend money on your property until you know what tenant's coming in. They'll tell you what they want. There's plenty of situations where people have spent money on a property and then the tenant just comes in and just rips it out and redoes it. So don't spend money. If the tenant asks you to do something and you haven't spent any cash, you're more available to do it. General rule with industrial, less office. Don't add more office. Always less. More mezzanine can be handy if it really functionally improves what you can do with the space. But office is, especially in industrial sense, you don't need a ton of it. People need more storage. They don't need more office. So.
Okay, perfect.
There you go. I wanted to get to when a property goes vacant, what are those sort of considerations on reletting? We may have spoken about some of these, so sorry if it's crossing over old ground, but what are the considerations you should look at when you're about to relet a property?
As in, what should I prepare for as an owner?
Yeah. Because it's I suppose that thing that, I mean, when you're doing a residential property, for example, it's pretty straightforward. If something's not up to scratch, then you kind of fix it, and you hopefully then get in a new tenant. Or those are the kind of things, like you literally put it on the market, and depending on what kind of market it's in, it'll hopefully rent relatively quickly, depending on the condition of the property. But is it that simple in commercial property?
I mean, good properties get leased quickly. When the tenant exits, make sure their make good's good. Sounds simple, but be on top of that. Make sure the make good happens correctly. Consider leaving good things in your building. If the tenant's done an improvement to the building, don't get it ripped out. If it adds to the building, leave it there. It's a free improvement. To be honest, appoint one agent, pay their fee, and market the thing. Get good photos. Don't just rely on someone who's there's an agent in Brisbane, I won't mention names, but he famously just takes photos from his car sometimes, and and it's hilarious on his phone. Don't do that. Actually pay $300, get professional photos, make it look nice, and it goes a long way. First impressions last. If people scrolling through and they see a big picture in a nice warehouse or a nice retail space, that's the best way to get their attention. Make it look good. It does work.
With the retail one, if it is a bit grimy, I know you said don't spend money if you don't have to, but would typically painting the walls white quickly just to freshen and make it look better, or would you still not bother for that because they might put in a kitchen or a nail salon or whatever it may be, and that's going to completely tile it anyway?
I mean, if there's something obviously wrong, there was an asset I had last year before I joined you guys, and it was trash. Once the tenant went bad, it was trash. So, spend the money you need to. So we got a professional cleaner through to do a full tip run, and there was some mold on a wall, so we got that cleaned up. Little things like that. Yeah, and when it comes, spend the money to present it well, but don't go crazy. Don't be adding stuff in. Don't get too crazy.
Does it change for office? If you've got an office, does having painted walls and carpet make a difference, and then they just come in with their cubicles, or do most office tenants still want to do their own carpet, paint the walls, and do all that stuff anyway?
If it's obviously bad, if the carpet's got holes in it and really, really worn, maybe consider replacing it. But you just want it to present well. It's no different from resi in that sense. If does it look good in photos, well, great. That's the most thing. That's the main thing, really. If you can get people's attention enough that they want to actually turn up and look at the building, that's really what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question is one of my friends who owned an office space painted the walls, put fresh black charcoal carpet down. Was like, oh, it's going to be a great tenant. The tenant I'm getting was an artistic co-working space. So they put floorboards down and a cool, and they didn't touch any anyway. So it literally wasted 15, 20 grand doing it.
Yeah.
So don't create a problem that's not there. Is something you've often told me, Steve. You don't tell me as much these days, so maybe I'm not creating problems, or maybe you're just too busy to tell me. You've stopped. It's when that person.
Remind me to come back to it. But one of the things Mick does well with commercial, we always find problems. It's very rare we do our due diligence find problems. Mick always comes and says, "What ones do we actually care about, though?" And that's the conversation he has to have with most clients. So maybe we can touch on that in the Q&A.
So what problems should we? Yeah, let's do it now. As long as you told me about this before on the chat last Friday, and I said these are the things that I would have not ever thought of. And you and I have had about 2,000 conversations about as many properties as you've bought in commercial, Steve. And I was like, I haven't heard this before, so I'm learning stuff. I like learning stuff, and I'm sure the audience does as well. So what are those things that what was the question, Steve? The problems that actually matter.
Yeah, that's right. So you're always going to find the problems, but then Mick always says, well, what problems do we actually care about? Which one's actually going to change our decision? So I think that's the thing. So what typical things are the no-goes, the maybes, and the, no, don't worry about it. That'll come out later on.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of make life hard for ourselves sometimes because we flag everything. We want to just good, bad, or indifferent. We want to mention it just so the client's aware. But that being said, we had a property this week actually in Brisbane that checked out fine, lease was fine, building and pest was remarkably clean, and then we got the strata report in, and turns out it probably needs north of $1 million of underpinning in the complex, and it's like, oh, that's an issue. We probably shouldn't buy that because the risk to our clients probably north of $100,000 at some point. So that's a big one. Like if we're going to crash a deal, it would have to be around major building issues, like building and pest goes through and you've got major issues like subsidence or a whole roof that needs to be replaced or little bits and pieces like that. But even sometimes that can be resolved. Like it's just a roof replacement, you can get quotes, you can get pretty hefty price reductions to accommodate that. But normally it's like big building works. Another thing can be fire cladding, like particularly with ground floor retail tenancies that are below residential. A lot of them can be great investments, but sometimes they've got these fire cladding issues where at some point it's going to have to be removed, and to the tune of a few $1 million normally. And sometimes it's hard to ascertain exactly what that cost is going to be. And even though our client might have a small percentage risk to that, like sometimes they can still add up to $50,000 or, you don't know. Like it just, they're little things like that can pop up. They can be real deal killers. I don't know. The lease not being exactly, what it's meant to be. We're expecting some sort of return and it comes in a whole percentage point under or 0.5% under, depending on people's budgets. That can be a killer. They're kind of the main three reasons we really, really crash. Most other things can be resolved. Like on a lot of properties, it's not uncommon to see body corporates that don't have the proper fire safety documents in place. Maybe they're in the process of updating them. Building and pest will flag lots of minor items because they've got to justify their report. And every building's got minor items, but it's a matter of just understanding what they are. We're looking for really the reason we do building and pest is to find major items. I don't know. Other things pop up like aircon servicing. Like aircon is always the one. Yeah, aircon's a really big deal. Depending on what it is, like if it's a big kind of what am I saying? Like a big ducted unit, they can be pretty expensive to replace, like 50 plus grand, sometimes more depending on how many you got. So you really want to make sure that's getting serviced correctly. If the system's old and we've got evidence of servicing, probably fine. But if the system's been flagged as a little bit older and we've got no history of servicing, it's a bit more of a risk. So depending on the client, they could take that in their stride, or that could be a deal killer. Those kind of things, really. There's probably more to it that I could talk about.
We always get the asbestos one where it's on the front facades and in the electrical box, and they just panic like, oh my God, there's asbestos. What are we going to do?
But isn't that the same? People panic in residential as well. And it's not to say that it's not dangerous, but at the same time, like as long as you're not significantly renovating, I mean, I don't want to talk to commercial. I'm not an asbestos expert, but as long as once you renovate, you have to make sure that's disposed of properly. And it can be a risk if you inhale too much of that sort of stuff as well. Of course, the Hardy, what is it, John? That guy. But what I was going to say as well is we're going to talk. I'm going to put you guys a little bit on the spot, maybe Steve mostly. We'll throw a little bit to Steve. I want to talk about because people are asking about locations and different asset types. I want to prize a bit of. Hopefully, I haven't primed this on this, so just wink twice, Steve, if we can't do this. Talk about some. Oh, there you go. Well, great. So there's been some awesome questions come through. I love the one from Kushal as well. So if you want to hear more about that where locations are looking interesting, and Mick, there's a couple of questions that come through that I think would be very interesting for you as well. So drop your questions, drop a fire, and we're going to take a break. I'm going to go get a cup of tea.
Dude, there are so many questions, Jeff. Like when I'm on by myself, there's like 2 questions. There's like YouTube and Facebook are going nuts.
Yeah, I know. It's insane. But go and grab yourself a cup of tea, but also watch this and book a call with the guys and with everyone. Go and support Oz Property. Buy a ticket as well for the event. We'll all be there. Maybe not Mick, but we'll fly them down.
Everywhere you look, someone else is making money in property except for you. Your mate, he just bought a house. It's already gone up $100,000. There's some bloke on Facebook, he's bragging about pulling in a 7% rental yield. Meanwhile, you're stuck scrolling real estate and domain, confused as hell and having no idea about where to start. Or maybe you're that mate that's got $100,000 in equity. You have a few properties under your belt, but you feel stuck. You're unsure about how to scale without over-leveraging and not knowing what the next right move is. So why does it feel like everyone else has some kind of secret that you're missing out on? It's because they do. There's a reason some people keep stacking properties while others sit on the sidelines stacking excuses. There's a reason why some investors buy under market value while others pay too much. There's a reason why investors know the hot spots before there's any heat. And there's a reason that some people build $150,000 in passive income while others just spend years thinking about it. And it comes down to knowledge. And that's exactly why Jeff Miles and I, Joe Tucker, created the Level Up Property course to hand you the exact step-by-step process that we've used to buy over $100 million worth of property in today's market. We've built Australia's largest property investment community with over 80,000 members, and we help everyday investors secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, all without wasting years of their life trying to figure it out the hard way. Making an uneducated decision on the biggest purchase in your life is just gambling with your future.
Stop it. Get some help.
And this isn't just another how to buy property course. Let's be clear though, this course isn't free. What? And neither should it be. This is our life's work. We've spent over 100 hours each on this course alone. Oh, babe. Okay, video number 3. Number 4 with million does... Fuck. Done. We've got decades of experience, millions of dollars in deals distilled into a repeatable process that you can take away for yourself. If you're looking for free advice, there's plenty of noise out there. You can go and find that if you'd like. But if you want real, actionable, step-by-step guided process that works in today's market, then this investment is going to change everything for you. By the time that you finish this course, you will have full confidence. You'll have every tool that you need to build an amazing portfolio if you act on it, right? Which is why we have mentoring built in. So we kick you up the butt to make sure that you're kicking your goals. So the real question is, how much longer are you going to watch everyone else making money in property before you jump in and start playing the property game properly? Because the sooner you start, the sooner you start winning.
Joe, you don't even need him on a live session. You just watch the ad and it goes about for almost as long. Anyway, I should plug my own prop. But anyway, insurance. We did promise boom locations, free boom, and Brisbane. I'm not saying Brisbane is, but Rebecca said, "Are you dobbing us in for Brisbane and the next one?" I kind of wanted to go to Melbourne, but anyway, that's okay. Where we go, Rebecca, yeah, just fly to Sydney. There's people flying from Perth for this. But anyway. Guys, we'll talk about, and I want to unpack some of these, and we'll talk insurance as well. Sydney retail versus Perth industrial. Now, these are two huge different, I don't know, can you actually compare those two? And can you compare, like, there's probably so many different aspects to it. I don't know. Is that like saying Tasmanian units or Launceston units to Mossman sort of waterside properties? Is that like, what is, can you compare those two?
The problem is if you just went to a suburb and a smaller thin cross section, that the problem with this is like retail is huge. Are we talking suburban retail, CBD retail, Northern Beaches on the Corso of Manly retail? They're all got like huge pros and cons. Weirdly, sometimes suburban retail, well, most of the time suburban has lower vacancy, and even regional towns can actually have a lower vacancy than CBDs because there's only one main street. So there's just case depends. So I think if they're asking maybe yields, probably similar-ish yields. Like you probably make it within like 5.5% in both.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Sydney retail versus Perth industrial. As Perth industrial's really come back then though, has it? So because you would have been able to get, were you able to get 6 or 7 or 8% commercial or industrial yields in Perth a couple of years ago? Is that sort of given the prices have increased?
Easy.
The yield?
Pretty much everything we bought 3 years ago had a 6 in front of it, and then it kind of came down to 5, and then now it's back at probably 5 to 5.5.
Nice. So I'm going to throw the question, and yes, we'll talk about insurance. And Elijah says there's no more questions for him tonight. Ask as many as you want to. I mean, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that. But guys, where are you seeing a lot of is the residential market similar to? Are you seeing a lot of people considering your Victoria for commercial as well, or do you sort of drive where people buy? Like, what does that look like? Where are we seeing value at the moment in commercial property? Mick, you want to weigh in on that? I probably can't answer it, but
look, everywhere around a major city is probably the correct answer. If you go more rural,
even Darwin, is Darwin a major city? What do we think about Darwin?
I don't want to offend Darwin's feelings, but no. No, look, Brisbane, all the majors. So Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. Like places like Sunshine Coast can do really well, but they can be a little bit more seasonal. But all the major hubs, they do really well. None of them are bad. You just need to understand what the norm is in that area, and you can find a good asset really. So yeah.
It's the same as like Darwin. We don't actually buy there. We haven't bought there for ages, probably a couple of years. You could probably still buy a really good commercial. Like we occasionally look there. Like you could go buy a whole medical center with a GP, pharmacy, blah blah blah, and get probably a decent yield. Probably get a retail yield of 7%. The capital growth might be the argument, but if you want a good tenant and a good 7% return, it might still actually suit your portfolio.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So Katie said Geelong. Are you talking about Geelong for where you want the next Oz Property Live Insights event, or is that where you want us to give some insights on the Geelong commercial property market? Katie, give us some feedback, because I don't know if I'm not a big fan of the Geelong Cats, so they seem to beat us quite regularly and beat us again on the weekend. So as a Sydney Swans fan, I don't, I'm sorry, but he beat us in grand finals and everything. So, but tell us, what do you mean? Do you want the event in Geelong, or what do you think about? Because guys, what do you think? Because there's a lot of medical in Geelong. So is that sort of warehouse rental? Okay, interesting, warehouse. So even giving us an asset in Geelong. Am I putting you on the spot here too much?
You just rambled quite a lot of stuff. What's the question for Mick?
Warehouse in Geelong. What do you have any insights?
Not personally from me. Steve can probably comment a little bit better on like that part of Sydney than myself. No, sorry, not Sydney. Down that way, Melbourne. Yeah. No, Steve.
We've bought actually quite a lot of residential there in the last 3 years. It's a really tight market. We haven't bought a lot of commercial there, which again I'm probably drawing a long straw, but like I imagine there's no bang for buck. And the vacancies are high there. So if you're not getting a good yield and the vacancies are higher, and there's the risk of obviously land, where if you're buying out in Geelong, if anyone's been there, it's like goes out to the sticks real quick. So there's a chance for oversupply. Yeah, you've got all those three factors where it's just like, cool, not getting a good yield, high chance of vacancy, more land to be developed, kind of why you're buying there. And that's sort of where we're coming with Melbourne as well. Like we've got a guy who just looks Melbourne all day, every day. And it's very hard to get a decent yield.
Jeez, you can't even get them in bloody commercial. Damn, that's a shame, because in residential, you're lucky if you get a 4% yield in Melbourne. And yes, you can chuck a granny out the back, and they're becoming more open to it down there in terms of that. But yeah, so in commercial, what you're struggling to get 5% yield.
So you're going 4 to 5.5 tops kind of thing, which is still compared to resi. It's what 2.4 times. Like it's still a decent chunk of thing. But again, it's just, but it's not buying. We're buying a few there, Mick. We're buying like maybe 2 or 3 a month.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a couple. Yep.
Fantastic. So, look, there's been an amazing amount of questions come through. I want to ask this one to you, Mick, because I think I was wondering, when you were in the agent space, did you see, I suppose, what are they called? Syndicates. Do you see many people team up to buy a commercial, acknowledging that it is a higher deposit? Did you see syndicates come to you, or even corporates come to you when you were selling? And are you still sort of seeing clients come to you now as well with that sort of, do they probably not come to syndicates, but multiple people coming together to buy a property?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the kind of, I guess, sub 3, sub 2, you get a lot of family trusts that will buy assets. And then I mean, in Brisbane, between 5 and 10 mil, you will get those bigger funds that will get a bunch of buyers together and sell out different shares and acquire an asset. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, they seem to go in seasons, definitely. But on the definitely the sub 3 mil area, there's lots of family trusts that are buying assets. You get 4 or 5 family members together for sure. Yeah.
And this is a really, really specific one. It's from Kushal. You guys should meet him. He's an interesting guy. If you get a commercially zoned land in a relatively large regional area, would you find first the right type of business and custom develop based on the business tenant requirement, or just develop sort of as is? I didn't get the rest of that question. What did he say? He said, develop a stock standard stuff that is likely to get tenanted soon. So if you're developing a commercial, is it based on the area and tenant type? Like, how do you think about that, Mick?
I mean, yeah, I'd do your research and build what's required in the area.
It's very specific.
D&C stuff, so design and construct for like a specific tenant can be great, but that's not as common. It depends on the area, obviously, but if there's a massive multinational that wants to set up a big facility in a key location, like, sure, that can work great. But often it's like, well, what's the demand in the area? Let's build that, and we'll have a guaranteed tenant supply or if you want to sell them off to small business, a guaranteed pool of buyers that will want this type of asset. So a good example of that is really small industrial sheds. That's been the flavor in Brisbane for the last 5 years. There's just such a demand for it. They know if they build it, they'll sell. And they know they can just keep increasing the prices because there's such a shortage and people will still entertain it. So, yeah.
He really knows how to...
I was going to say, I think they're also alluding to like buying the land and all of a sudden having this perfect tenant come there, like a McDonald's coming like, oh, I'll build a McDonald's there, or, oh, can I build a childcare center? It's perfect for me. They're trying to do that, which rarely happens. I've seen people all the time do that, especially with childcare. They think like, oh, I'll get an approval for a childcare center, and then it sits there for 3-4 years, and then they just end up selling it with an approval.
Yeah.
You got to answer that question fantastically, though, Michael. Well done, mate. Like, you answer questions really well.
Thank you.
Not just well, but really well. No. So got a classic. Tim's asked the what typical good value. Like, it's that we got that question 2 or 3 times this session, Steve. It's crazy. I don't know, answer you want. Insurances. What about insurances being high? Doesn't in most leases the tenant pays the insurance, or can that be built into the lease? Maybe not.
Yeah. So insurance being high due to tenant types. This person's probably got experience with a tobacco shop, maybe.
Or a tattooist, or can you get insurance for tattooists?
Laundromat, petrol stations, single-use stuff. What else is there?
Even like anything to do with cabinetry. That you get big insurance bills because of the fire risk with all the sawdust, cutting, fiberglass. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Your insurance premiums can go through the roof depending on the tenant you got in your building, for sure.
Here's a random one. We bought a property, Jeff, that was like an indoor like sports center, but part of the indoor sports center they had a physio. So a separate tenant, a physio, a cafe, and then a bar as well.
Yep.
Which you think on the whole, you're like, oh, this is a cool little lively hub. But
they don't mix that well.
Well, the insurers just hated it anyway because there's so many different tenants, and because they're all kind of going between all 3 of them, they'll physio. Like if someone goes and gets their, I don't know, they do a physio exercise and they've hurt their knee, but they hurt it from the football, who's actually getting blamed? And that's why insurers didn't like the finger would get pointed around. And then
what if they had a B first? What if they had a B first and then
that was the other one? That was exactly. So that was like a specialty one, which on the whole made a lot of sense from a business point of view. But the insurance just want to touch it. And we've got bouldering gyms as well. And they don't like them because typically a neck injury is an expensive one. So if they fall off and hurt their neck and you got to pay $10 million over 10 years, they don't want to take that gamble.
Yeah. I remember the good old days when I used to play indoor cricket as like a 17 or 18-year-old. You go to an indoor cricket on a Sunday night or whatever it was, or even underage, and these guys having these beers on the court. It's like, what the heck's going on? This is like 15, 20 years ago.
So I used to referee indoor soccer, and Friday night was the worst shift because the tradies would just be on it since about 2:00 and come play their game at 6, 7, 8, and it was just carnage. Especially Sydney's West as well, where I grew up.
Mate, yeah, like St. Mary's Indoor. I mean, I'm sure it's great now, but yeah, not to smash businesses, but yeah, they were great. They're doing a roaring trade, and yeah, I knew the operators there, but anyway, that's but beside the point. 3 questions in, people, because I think we've discussed everything from how to increase your 300,000 valuation. So that's going to, and is there a big short on Brisbane property office space? I don't think. I think the consensus was no, but I'm sorry, I'm cherry picking. But this is because I have to do the intro session after this, so I'm thinking about how I'm going to make it really spicy for people to watch. But what questions do people have about commercial? And we can ask that typical good value, because we are wrapping up here, team. We're getting close to the hour and a half. Oh, what is? I did tequila shots. Oh, geez. Okay, Greg's going crazy in the comments here. Actually, the question I had for you guys: what is the best question somebody about to buy a commercial? And Steve, I'm not going to throw to you because you'll say what are you trying to achieve? Probably. But what is the best question somebody should ask about getting into commercial property, Mick?
Best question I should ask. I mean, practically, how much money do I need to get a loan is probably the first question. But yeah, what are you trying to? I'm going to be like Steve. Like, what are you trying to achieve? Like what is it? Like, what's the goal? Because you don't want to just buy something for the fun of it. Commercial property can be a lot of work, but it can be hugely beneficial if you know what you are trying to achieve. So I'd have to agree with Steve, really. So.
Okay. I would say, well, yeah, for me, it's like, well, what is my, how comfortable am I with taking on something a little bit extra, or because I love a bit of value add. So, but maybe I'm sort of being a bit cheeky and trying to come up with something a bit creative. Kushal, again, he's in the question. He says, Melbourne office space, is anyone buying them? Is it, I think suburban probably, yes, but what about, does it depend on the type of office space as well? Like a blue chip office space is probably going well, but what do you guys think about that? Maybe not, I don't know.
We don't deal directly in the space really, but a lot of the big high end of town office spaces, they're owned by big funds. You know, it's all owned by the massive super funds typically, unless he's asking about like a small little strutted thing. But yeah, most of that's for the big end of town. Really, it's not what we deal with day to day. So
yeah,
yes,
one of the traps I see people fall in is they say like Sydney or Melbourne, they'll go, oh, I'm thinking about buying office space in Sydney or Melbourne. They're not buying the CBD because they can't afford that typically. And if they are, they're probably buying an inferior asset. They're buying a little shoebox in a little back alley kind of type one. They end up talking about like the equivalent for Sydney would be, I don't know Melbourne well enough, but like North Sydney. They start looking at like North Sydney or something like that and then buying there, where getting data on those vacancy rates is really tough. You can look at the city as a whole for the big ones, but that's a tougher one. There's value there. Like you can typically get 7-8% net yields in office space, but on average you're looking at 15 to 20% vacancy rates. So you got to weigh that up as well. We bought a cool one in and like Mick said as well, suburban offices are really cool as well because you can actually have dual use. So we bought in Balgowlah on the Northern Beaches, and it was a little office block, but it was actually a dance studio. So it was like a ballet studio on the second floor. So it's an office, but it's a ballet studio. So you get retail and you get those. So that's the cool thing about the suburban ones.
So you go straight from sort of punching out some work and then go to the ballet, I suppose, or go and do some ballet. Yeah. Sounds a bit risky as well. I think you could, wonder what insurers thought of that one.
It's not a pole studio.
Oh yeah, that would be, they're probably tough to insure as well. Guys, there's been a lot of, are there any questions that I did miss asking Polizzi? Because actually, here we go. One's come through. What are we, okay. Matty Brand, here we go. We don't, Matty Brand's a big supporter of the show. So with the growth rate being comparable to residential, I mean, I want some more data on this, Steve. Could you present some data on us on the Oz Property Insights event? Worth into during the acquisition phase now instead of waiting for the consolidation stage. So he's using level up property terms, acquisition or accumulation consolidation. What do you? I mean, I've got a view on that, but what do you think, Mick? It doesn't have to be like, I know it's maybe a little bit out of your wheelhouse and due diligence, but if Steve's okay with it, you can answer.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question he's asking, but I mean,
Is it worth buying commercial sort of earlier on in the journey versus kind of getting to the back end for more of a cash flow heavy play towards the back end or focus? That's kind of what the question is. Should they buy it sort of earlier in the investing, given that the growth rate being comparable, or arguably comparable, depending on what it is, where it is, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's kind of the question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it depends what the goal is, obviously. I mean, if you're not looking for cash flow, then residential's fine. But there is that saying, like the first time buying an asset type is always the hardest, right? You buy your first home, that's really hard. It's a big jump. Buying your first commercial is really hard.
I think it's a bit scary.
But once you're in it, I mean, if the goal is cash flow, then sure, I reckon. Like, one of the great things of COVID is that we got to see how, you know, all assets, all ships rise with the tide. You know, if the valuations are going up across the board, commercial will go with that, you know, and maybe not to the same extent as residential, but then you get the benefit of cash flow, and that cash flow can typically pay down your loan a lot faster than residential as well. So, you know, there's trade-offs both ways.
I think it also depends on your risk profile, Jeff. So like when you're buying, like I get a lot of like clients that are starting out and they don't want to be leveraged up to the eyeballs anyway. They're like, oh, no, I don't want them to, and they're actually going to chuck in a 20 or 30%, or they're going to put in a 20%, like, oh, I'm going to pay it down over the next 5 years anyway. Yep. If you're losing the leveraging part of it anyway, then maybe putting it earlier on in your portfolio is a better option anyway, because if you get it right, you get both sides. But most people fall over because we've all bought dud residential properties here in this group. So like if you're doing that with residential and you're trying to do that in property number 1, 2, or 3 for commercial, like a lot more spaces to burn yourself.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. The questions keep flying through on YouTube. They're asking, they want to know what you guys are buying, and like they're asking us for a property plan. Everything's going on. I was going to say Clive Churchill or Winston is still in the comments as well. I love it. Renaissance Gorilla. Please come back to us. Come back to us again, Mr. Churchill.
Share your identity as well.
What was that, man?
Share your identity, Renaissance Gorilla.
Oh, that's okay. It's kind of fun having these quirky YouTube things. But it does. Oh, yeah, the comments are Ash is in Facebook now as well. I think he's trying to audition for something at you guys. So guys, I think unless there's any absolute burning questions, do you want to ask those ones in the YouTube, Steve, or we could wrap this up? Otherwise, it's going to be questions.
Let's find another one. Growth being comparable to residential, popular diversification.
Otherwise, they'll keep coming.
Okay, it's dangerous. Yeah, let's just finish on Renaissance Gorilla, where he's saying, is your portfolio diversification in commercial still good risk management?
Oh, here we go. Matty Brand said cheers. It needs to be beers with the cheers. So Renaissance has said, is portfolio diversification in commercial still good risk management? Should you buy 2 quality assets in Brisbane versus one in Brisbane and one in Sydney, assuming both are of equal value and quality? Gee, that's a big question.
I mean, diversification is always a good idea. Really, yeah. Are you in the risk on stage of investing where you're trying to make as much as possible, or are you in the wealth preservation stage of your investing career? You know, diversification is always the best move if you're trying to preserve wealth. But maybe an area is booming and you just want to put all your eggs in there and make as much as you can, and then diversify out of that. Maybe that's the play, depending on where you're at. I think it depends on the stage you're at, really.
Yeah, I like that a bit better than Steve's. It's case by case. At least you.
I was going to say it depends how educated you are. If you've got the time and energy to educate yourself in 2 different markets, then of course. But then buying 2 mediocre assets, one high priced one is still going to perform better than that. So it's just balancing that.
Yeah, guys, it's been a great session. I was going to say, if you've gotten value from this, how to maximize your commercial property return, give us a 5-star on Spotify, people. Nice answer, Mick. There you go. Rebecca's giving the pundits, the plaudits, that's the right word. Spotify, give us a 5-star, because I want to get us out there to I want to get commercial. I want to get residential. We might even get, so drop us that. I love, and get me stop talking about it. But Mick, what is the best way to find out more about what you do? How's the best way for people to get more of Michael Schafferius in their life? I butchered it. Sorry.
You're about to swear there, mate. Google Policey Property, and that's Steve's face will pop up. You'll see the beard, and that's how you can get in contact with us. Really.
Yeah. Are there often fights about who has the best beard in the office? Does that happen?
We've actually got a lot of beards.
There's a lot of beards. Steve definitely has the biggest beard, and it's still not grey. I don't know if he dyes it or not, but it's very dark. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Careful.
Yeah,
This is
he's
being
the 2-year-old's killing me.
Yeah. Okay, guys. That was a fantastic session. People are loving it, and thanks for coming on, Mick, and spending that time and energy with us. Particularly given
in all seriousness, though, Jeff, if people want to ask Mick questions, just email Policey Property the contact us page, and next in the comments, just write, can you please give me Mick's email, phone number, and I want to have a chat with Mick, and he'll give you a buzz.
Yeah, there we go. So
cool.
He'll be signing autographs at one of these days, maybe soon, because people are saying people are loving it. They're saying follow the beard. Thanks, guys. Another great session, and Matty Brand said cheers and check us out. So, guys, let's go and maximize our commercial property return.